Vivian Vance was once America's favorite neighbor, the woman whose quick wit and clumsy charm helped turn a sitcom into one of the most iconic shows of all time. But what audiences never saw was the price she paid behind the cameras, the humiliation, the abuse, and the battles she carried silently for decades. She lived with rumors that were never true, feuds that never healed, and private wounds that fame only made worse. Today, the story that was buried for years finally comes to light, and it will change the way you remember her forever. The beginning of a star in chains. Vivian Roberta Jones was born on July 26, 1909, in Cherryvale, Kansas, into a family ruled by strict Methodist values. From the very beginning, her love for performance collided with her mother's iron grip on religion. To her mother, acting was sinful and shameful, a direct path to hell. Every time Vivian showed her natural spark, whether it was singing, dancing, or making people laugh, her mother crushed it. That tension created a war inside the house, and Vivian grew up feeling like an outsider among her 5 siblings. When her family moved to Independence, Kansas, she began sneaking out at night, not for parties or fun, but simply for freedom. She wanted to perform, to be on a stage, even if her mother condemned it. At school, she found her first true ally. A drama teacher named Anna Engelman encouraged her talent and gave her the space to shine. She joined cheerleading, competed in beauty contests, and studied alongside classmates like William Inge, who would later become a Pulitzer-winning playwright. Friends began calling her Viv, a name that felt freer, lighter, and closer to the person she wanted to be. Eventually, she made a decision that symbolized her break from her family's control. She abandoned her birth name and became Vivian Vance, taking her last name from Vance Randolph, a folklorist she admired. It was more than just a stage name. It was a declaration of independence. She was no longer her mother's daughter. She belonged to herself. In 1930, at just 21, she became one of the founding performers at the Albuquerque Little Theater, where her talent left audiences spellbound. Locals even nicknamed the building the Vivian Vance Playhouse because of her performances. The community rallied around her, raising money so she could travel to New York City and chase her dream. She arrived in Manhattan with little more than $50 and a suitcase, working as a waitress by day while auditioning by night. After countless rejections and nights without proper meals, she finally landed a chorus role in the Broadway musical Music in the Air in 1932. The show ran for 2 years and gave her the first taste of real success. Over the next decade, Vivian fought her way from the background to the spotlight, appearing in productions like Hooray for What in 1937 and Let's Face It in 1941, alongside Danny Kaye and Eve Arden, which ran for 547 performances. She had proven herself a Broadway star. But behind the curtain, her personal life was already unraveling. Her first marriage to Joseph Danick Jr. ended in heartbreak after only 3 years, and her second, to actor Philip Ober in 1941, would turn out to be far darker. Abuse, breakdown, and the road to Hollywood. By the early 1940s, Vivian Vance had established herself on Broadway, but her personal life was crumbling. In 1941, she married actor Philip Ober, a man whose jealousy and insecurity soon turned violent. While Vivian's career was rising, Ober's was sinking. The imbalance fueled his rage, and he began to physically abuse her. At first, she hid the bruises, but the truth could not stay buried forever. During the filming years of I Love Lucy, she sometimes arrived at the studio with black eyes, and even Lucille Ball noticed. Lucy confronted her and declared, "If you don't divorce him, I will do it for you." But in that era, Hollywood was not forgiving to women who spoke out about domestic abuse. Vivian endured in silence, terrified of both her husband and the damage that exposure could do to her career. The emotional toll became unbearable. In 1945, while touring with The Voice of the Turtle, Vivian collapsed under the weight of her pain. She later admitted, Let's face it, I cracked up. She suffered her first nervous breakdown, overwhelmed by years of childhood repression, marital abuse, and professional pressure. Doctors diagnosed her with what was then called anxiety neurosis, and she began therapy, a process she would continue for much of her life. Therapy was not common in those years, especially for women, but it was her only way of holding herself together. That experience changed her. She quietly began visiting psychiatric hospitals, not as a celebrity, but as someone who knew what it meant to feel broken. She offered words of comfort, reminding patients they were not alone. Despite her private battles, Vivian kept moving forward professionally. She returned to Broadway and in 1947 appeared in a revival of The Cradle Will Rock. She then moved west to California, chasing opportunities in Hollywood. But the transition was difficult. She appeared in just 2 films, The Secret Fury in 1950 and The Blue Veil in 1951. A chance at stardom slipped through her fingers more than once. She refused a striptease role that later made Mary Martin famous, and she lost another part in Carousel after a choreographer, harboring a grudge, had her dismissed. For every small step forward, there seemed to be a larger step back. Yet Vivian didn't give up. She was still fighting for her place when, in 1951, a decision would change her life forever. She was cast as Ethel Mertz in a brand new sitcom called I Love Lucy, the myth of the contract and a toxic partnership. In 1951, Vivian Vance, then 42 years old, stepped into the role that would define her life, Ethel Mertz, on I Love Lucy. At first glance, it seemed like a dream come true. She had steady work, a national audience, and the chance to etch her name into television history. But from the very beginning, the role was surrounded by rumors that would follow her for decades. For years, fans and even journalists believed that Vivian had signed a humiliating contract requiring her to gain 15 pounds, so Lucille Ball would appear thinner and more glamorous by comparison. The truth was far less sensational, but no less painful. There was no such contract. The story started as a joke Lucille told at a party, scribbling out absurd rules, like gaining 5 pounds a week or never being funnier than Lucy. Somehow, the joke became Hollywood legend, repeated so many times that it overshadowed reality. In truth, Vivian's weight simply fluctuated over time, often because she was dieting or under stress. Still, the rumor damaged her. It painted her as a prop, a shadow sacrificed so the star could shine. And there was some truth to that, though not in the form of a contract. Lucille Ball herself initially resisted casting Vivian. She argued, "You can't be Ethel. You're my age. You have the same hair color. You're too pretty." To dull that threat, the production team forced Vivian into unflattering clothes and heavy makeup designed to make her look older, heavier, and less glamorous. On screen, Ethel became the frumpy, naive neighbor whose purpose was to set up Lucy's antics. Off-screen, Vivian felt humiliated, trapped in an image she didn't recognize as her own. If that weren't enough, the role paired her with William Frawley, who was cast as her on-screen husband, Fred Mertz. The first time she saw him, Vivian asked, "Who's that old man?" When she learned he would play her husband, she laughed, saying he looked more like her grandfather. Frawley overheard the remark and never forgave her. From that moment, the animosity was permanent. He mocked her in rehearsals, calling her cruel names like a sack of doorknobs. She despised being forced into the role of his wife, embarrassed by their 25-year age gap. Behind the laughter millions of viewers adored, Fred and Ethel's marriage was built on real hatred. Their feud became one of Hollywood's most infamous, lasting long after the cameras stopped rolling. By 1953, the tension was unbearable. Frawley's alcoholism was spiraling out of control. He often showed up drunk, slurred his lines, and locked himself in his dressing room while the cast and crew waited. Vivian eventually demanded a separate dressing room, refusing to share space with him. From then on, Fred and Ethel existed only on screen. Off camera, they lived in silence, their only connection being the scripts that bound them together: awards, laughter, and the hidden cost. In February 1954, Vivian Vance made history. She became the first woman ever to win an Emmy Award for Outstanding Supporting Actress, a brand new category that was created because of her role as Ethel Mertz. It was recognition not only of her talent, but also of the value of supporting characters in television. Before Vivian, side roles were often overlooked, dismissed as filler for the leads. Her win changed that forever, proving that the woman standing in the background could shape a story just as much as the star. She would be nominated 3 more times in 1954, 1956, and 1957. But while the industry was applauding her, Vivian felt increasingly trapped. The very award that crowned her career also locked her into a single image. She had once been a glamorous Broadway star with a trained singing voice, but now the world saw only Ethel, the dowdy housewife. Even when she pushed for storylines that highlighted her musical talent, like the 1954 episode Ethel's Birthday, William Frawley mocked her, sneering that she couldn't sing. She knew she was capable of more, but Hollywood refused to let her escape the box it had built for her. Behind the famous laughter, the work itself was grueling and, at times, dangerous. The legendary Chocolate Factory episode from 1952 looked like harmless slapstick to viewers, but it left Vivian sick and exhausted. The conveyor belt malfunctioned repeatedly, speeding up without warning. Take after take, she was forced to shove chocolates into her mouth until she could barely stand. By the end of filming, she was nauseous and miserable. That same year, Lucille Ball filmed the now iconic Vitamita Vegamin commercial scene, where Lucy became drunk on a health tonic. What the audience didn't know was that the tonic actually contained 23% alcohol. Lucy swallowed spoon after spoon during multiple takes until she was visibly intoxicated. Vivian, standing nearby, watched her co-star stagger through the lines, both women sacrificing their comfort for the sake of comedy that millions would later cherish. The fame that came with I Love Lucy was double-edged. Vivian began receiving thousands of letters each week. Some were sweet, but many were disturbing. Obsessed fans followed her in public, knocked on her door late at night, and mailed her threatening notes. "Ethel must die," one cruel message read, scrawled next to a collage of her face. For the first time, Vivian felt unsafe just walking down the street. She hired security, something few television actors of the 1950s ever imagined needing. The neighbor everyone loved on screen had become a target in real life, and the cost of laughter grew heavier with every passing year. Walking away, losing ground, and fading lights. By 1965, after more than a decade tied to Lucille Ball, Vivian Vance made a decision that shocked the public. She walked away. Leaving the Lucy show at the height of its success seemed unthinkable. Millions still adored Ethel, and studios considered her essential to Lucy's magic. But Vivian had reached a breaking point. She felt smothered by the role, worn down by constant comparisons, and desperate to reclaim her own identity. Giving it up meant losing security, steady paychecks, and the comfort of being part of America's favorite comedy team. Many called it career suicide, but for Vivian, it was survival. She tried to restart on her own terms. In 1966, she returned to Broadway in Woody Allen's play Don't Drink the Water. It was supposed to be a triumphant comeback. Instead, it turned into public humiliation. During rehearsals, she was fired and replaced, with Allen bluntly stating she wasn't right for the part. The show went on to run for 598 performances without her. For Vivian, the rejection was devastating. It confirmed her worst fear, that she could never escape the shadow of Ethel Mertz. The years that followed brought stability, but little fulfillment. By the 1970s, she became the smiling face of Maxwell House coffee commercials, playing a cheerful neighbor named Maxine, who offered warm cups of coffee with a friendly line. Could be the best instant of your day. The ads made her familiar to a new generation, but they also served as a reminder that her days of Broadway musicals and Emmy-winning performances were gone. She was keeping herself visible, but not in the way she had once dreamed. Behind the commercials and occasional television appearances, her health began to falter. In 1973, Vivian was diagnosed with breast cancer. She underwent a mastectomy and endured rounds of chemotherapy, trying to keep her illness private. To the public, she was still smiling, still cracking jokes, but behind closed doors, she was often in agony. She continued to work, even making a brief return to Lucy's side in the 1977 CBS special Lucy Calls the President. For audiences, it was a sweet reunion. Few knew that during filming, Vivian suffered a minor stroke. She did her best to hide the tremors and delivered her lines with the same wit as always, but it was clear her body was failing her. Final days, last goodbyes, and an unfinished legacy. By the late 1970s, Vivian Vance's once bright career had narrowed to a quiet existence overshadowed by illness. Cancer had ravaged her body, spreading beyond control, and the pain became constant. Yet she refused to let the world see her broken. Even as her health declined, she carried herself with dignity, still offering the humor and warmth that had made her beloved. In 1979, she moved to Belvedere, California, where she spent her final months surrounded by close friends. It was during this time that Lucille Ball, her former co-star, partner, and rival, came to visit. Paige Peterson, a neighbor, later recalled how the two women sat together all afternoon, laughing, crying, and reminiscing. When Lucy finally stood to leave, she was in tears. She didn't say a word, just walked away with grief etched into her face. Lucy Arnaz, Lucille's daughter, later revealed that her mother cried for Vivian for months. Despite all the arguments, jealousy, and tension, their bond ran deeper than the spotlight. They were soulmates in comedy, and losing Vivian left a hole Lucy never truly healed from. Before her death, Vivian dictated a series of handwritten letters. In them, she revealed how the industry had restricted her, dismissing her ambitions to direct and trapping her in roles designed to make her look smaller, plainer, less significant. These letters were more than a farewell. They were an indictment of an industry that silenced women and a confession of the scars she carried from a lifetime of endurance. On August 17, 1979, Vivian Vance passed away at the age of 70. The world remembered her as Ethel Mertz, the lovable neighbor who made them laugh. But behind that laughter was a woman who had endured abuse, humiliation, breakdowns, and the cruelty of being underestimated. Vivian Vance gave the world joy, but behind her smile was a story of pain, courage, and resilience. Do you think she ever received the recognition she truly deserved, beyond being remembered only as Ethel Mertz? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more untold stories of Hollywood's greatest legends.